This is Colin Digits. I'm here today again with Rick, Launchpad School in session. We're going to go over the Launchpad tiers today, which is obviously something that we're all dealing with most of the time, yet can be quite complex, doesn't always have to be. So we want to understand from today why they're Launchpad tiers, how they work in your favor, but how they can also work against you. Rick, obviously, if you're not familiar with him, quite new to everything related to Launchpads, we're just learning part of the process. Of course, he knows a tremendous amount of things already, but going into a little bit more detail is always good, like the theory behind it, the really annoying stuff that you might not usually think of when looking at these Launchpads, right? So let me just pull up the list, I can show you, and you can make your pick on what you think is the Launchpad we should go for today. So I'm on CoinMarketCap right now. I'm going to pull up the Launchpad section. Here we go. So the performance today relative to everything else is not that great. Bitcoin moving down a little bit, right? In terms of the tiers, which one do you think would be relevant to pick up? I think we can do it based on anything, but do you have any specific preference?
Not per se. Maybe it's good to look at a slightly bigger Launchpad.
Yeah, want to go for CDFI in that case? I know there are tiers, there's like multiples. So exactly. Usually you would be able to find it on their website, but for CDFI specifically, it is on their website. So always make sure you have the most up-to-date tiers. They don't change that often, but it does happen that they get updated. And that's obviously one of the things that we will talk about today. So CDFI fund tiers. And then basically you get the updated tier system. Usually it's the first link. Do check the rest of the links, but there's nothing more up to date than 29th of August, 2021. So this is the most recent tier system. They are going to cover a full 9-tier system where all tiers, upgraded the 3-tier system to 9 tiers. So in that case, you would only do that if you have more users than you would expect to have, right? Give them more choices. So it's lottery based, guaranteed, 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 guaranteed. So there's already quite a few things that we need to understand at this point, right? What's the difference between lottery and guaranteed? What does pool weight mean? Because apparently it's quite significant. It goes from 1.2 all the way to 325. That's quite a big difference. And why would they classify them in certain tiers, right? There's always a requirement to hold the token. So let's assume, of course, apart from DigitsClub, which is one of the huge benefits at the moment, that there's no tiers, right? Which means that we use a weighted average to calculate which percentage you would get. However, 99% of other launchpads use a tier system, which you need to hold to their token and stake their token in order to get a relatively higher pool weight. So what would the pool weight do basically?
Pool weight. So essentially at the end of the day, the pool is it basically decides how big of a cut of the pie you will get, right? So you get the total pool. So if your pool weight is 5 from let's say a total pool of 100, you're going to be able to push more money into it, get more returns. I think that's the most basic explanation for it.
Yeah, that's the idea. So you can see that it's not relative to 100%, right? So it's like 1.2, but somewhere like 325. The main idea here is you make a commitment to the Launchpad by staking a certain amount of investment, right? And this is not in US dollars. This is in their token, right? S-Fund token. And basically, in return, you get a specific pool weight, which means all the participants that would like to participate carry a certain weight. Those are being added to the pool. From that, you get also a weighted average, and that is the average from the total pool. So that is a percentage, and you own that percentage of the pool, and that's the allocation that you get. So pool weight is obviously tremendously important, but it's basically one-on-one tied to the investment that you're going to make, which I think makes sense. The people that make a bigger investments get a bigger allocation, because what is the reason to participate on a Launchpad? Because you want to invest money. right? And they give you a bigger opportunity. Why would you have, let's say, so these are all called guaranteed, right? Which is basically means guaranteed allocation. And there's always usually the first pool or the first two pools, it depends on how many they have, are lottery based. What does that mean?
Means that you're not guaranteed to get an allocation. So usually you get the first couple of tiers, usually like 1 lottery, 6 lottery, 13 lottery tickets, something like that, which will give you a percentage of chance to actually get one of those allocations. And if you're unlucky, you're not going to be able to participate, even though you have a lottery ticket. So it's basically just like a lottery in real life, right?
In general,
in general,
yes.
right? Any lottery, same concept.
Why would a Launchpad do the lottery? Because they don't have to. They could just say, like, if there's, let's say 100 tickets available for everything, and this is all guaranteed, and it works out perfectly. There's 100 tickets here. Why wouldn't they just say the people that stake the most get those 100 tickets?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say because they would prefer people to stake more of their coins. So if it's way too easy to get a guaranteed allocation, people would have to stake less of their coins. So making that amount higher and difficult to get to will incentivize more people to say, I don't want a lottery ticket. I'm going to invest in this. So I'm going to want it guaranteed. So they'll put more money in it, get more coins staked.
Yeah, that makes sense. So why wouldn't I just cut this tier in that case and just say like 1K S fund and up is the pools? Because this is all guaranteed, right? So this is the guaranteed is not the one that stands out. The actual lottery is the one here that stands out. So why would they include lottery?
Well, I suppose you always have people that just have less to spend. So to give them an option as well to get in a smaller price.
But why? Is it because they care so much about those people, or is there like a business motivation
business,
for them?
Obviously, yeah. I mean, you're going to miss out on these people if you don't have that one tier that is super cheap. You're going to miss out on all of those people that only have that amount of money to spend. So and in the end, they all stack up. It becomes a pretty big sum of money. So you want those people as well.
Yeah, I would say so. If you could raise the money on the tier 2 to tier 9, right, there would be no reason for the company to offer tier 1, even though, let's say, $5 times 1,000 or 1 of 5,000, that's fine, right? They raise the money anyway. But it's more when we look at like the business purpose of a launchpad, right? So the business purpose, specifically, Emerson, you are 100% correct in the Q&A chat. Don't look at it, Rick, no cheating. But of course, it's like a two-sided equation. One job of the Launchpad is to fill the pool, right? That's their business responsibility to the project. But at the same time, it's called, which round does a Launchpad host out of the rounds we spoke about last week? So which rounds are there in terms of raising money for a crypto project?
Typically private and public.
Okay, so those are the last 2 rounds. So what other 2 rounds are there?
Seed and man, I called it production last time.
Yeah. The difficult one.
Yeah.
So it's seed, something, private, public. That's correct.
Yeah. Man.
Is strategic.
Strategic, of course, it's strategic. Man,
seed, strategic, private, public. Yeah. So on that note, you said they would host private and public, mostly public, right, for the Launchpads. So it's in the name, public. What is the goal of a public round? It's not specifically to raise money, because the majority of the money, which we looked at the tokenomics, is raised on private. So if IDO pools, so public pools, is 1 to 3%, right? Then private is usually 3.5% to 15%. So it's huge on the tokenomics. So public has a different purpose.
Yeah. It's public. I'm just going to go and assume that it is for promotional purposes. Get the word out there. Get their face on every magazine.
You're smarter
whatever.
than you look, eh? All right. Fair enough. So when it comes down to lottery, what happens on a lottery? What is the goal here? Marketing, promotional purposes. The goal is to attract as many people as possible, to spread the word. And then in return, you give them the opportunity to potentially get an allocation. And even if you do get an allocation, it's super small, right?
Right.
So it's a very different philosophy. Yes, they're obviously going to say, we are a launchpad that cares about everybody. You know, we want to share the love. They don't give a fuck about that. They need to fulfill their promise of being a marketing engine, right? And that marketing engine has to create reach. And if they cannot create reach on the guaranteed tiers enough, usually, this is also the tier 1 people. Usually the lottery, you can win lottery tickets through Gleam competitions. Again, reach, right? So the people that get guaranteed allocation, I've never, ever in my life on Launchpad participated in a Gleam competition. Why not? Because I always have one of the highest tiers. So for me, I get enough allocation. I don't have to follow on Twitter, do all these garbage things, but that is like to create the reach, right?
Right.
So very important to note that on the lottery, yeah, your odds of winning usually are quite slim, right? Depending on the amount of participants, of course, but it's almost always a lottery tier there, unless there are significant prior commitments. Like, for example, DigitsClub doesn't have a lottery tier. Why not? Because you need to hold an NFT, which is blocking the option of doing a lottery, right? And also our job is not to reach, our job is just to raise the money, right? Different business point of view. But you were very much correct when you said their purpose is raising money, but the marketing and exposure is another business commitment of the Launchpad that you basically notice inside the tier system. So quite interesting. If you would analyze this tier system, right? You mentioned before different levels for different levels of investors, right? This lottery pool called tier 1, where in the world would we go to identify this tier 1? Or basically, let's not make it based on like a geographical location, because I think we all understand how that works. But let's assume there's one economic indicator that would basically push you into one of these tiers. And in this example, basically lottery or guaranteed allocation. What is usually per country the indicator where you know these type of people go into these tiers?
It's a very in-depth question.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one as well.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm going to go on a limb here and say that you have to buy the coins usually with your own currency, right? So that'd be US dollar or whatever. So if you are in a country where you have a coin, a token, not a token, a currency that is not very high value, may it be actually more expensive to buy the tokens? Or is that not how it works?
You went in such an amazing direction, but then the ending wasn't that good. So why it has a currency a low valuation relative to other currencies? It has to do with a very economic metric, and that's what I want to know. So I was like, man, you're heading straight for it.
Why? So you want to know why certain currencies are worth less than, let's say, the US dollar?
Yes.
Right.
Significantly less.
Significantly less. That's a very complicated question. I actually watched a documentary on it just a couple of days ago. I should be able to answer this, but I believe it has to do with trade a lot. So import, export. So these countries, they most other countries, they want to trade in US dollars. So you're going to be spending, you're going to be buying US dollars with your country's money to buy, let's say, water or electricity or whatever it be. And because you're buying the US dollars, the value of the US dollar goes up. And because the whole world basically trades in US dollars.
Okay, that's foreign exchange. That's an interesting topic, but that's not what we're, so that's like a macroeconomic, but it's not it's a microeconomic trend, the foreign exchange, but we're looking at one bigger scale. So let's say England is worth $28.6 trillion, right? Where does this value come from?
Yeah.
Because you said buying and selling produce. That is correct. That is what we would define as industry, right?
Right.
But there's a specific key term that identifies the value of a nation.
That is per capita.
yeah, you're correct. You're correct. But
income per capita it is, right? Or there was a word for it.
It's it's not income, but you are in the right direction. It's called gross domestic product.
Then I was not in the right direction.
But it's measured per capita, basically.
Right, exactly.
So
okay,
the gross domestic product is basically your income per capita, right? The total revenue, income, economic value, measured total or per citizen. So total, it doesn't say that much because a bigger country will have a bigger total volume of GDP, but per capita, its relative significance to per inhabited, how much economic value is being produced. So Switzerland has a very high GDP, where the US has a high GDP, but per capita, it's a lot lower because they have a lot of people, right? So basically, usually we say like, oh, what are like tier 3 countries, right? I have an advertising background. Tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 is very common to say, where tier 1 is like high GDP and tier 3 is low GDP. And all of the consequences below that is that the online traffic is cheap in tier 3 and expensive in tier 1. Or because supply and demand, more advertisers want to advertise expensive products in tier 1. There's not enough reach. So high demand, low supply, price goes up, right? And those are all interesting to note because they're all basic economic terms, basic, more advanced sometimes, right? But when we look at these Launchpad tiers, why is it full of Indians, Pakistanis? Not because they are from these countries, right? It has nothing to do with the country or the ethnicity, because over time, these metrics will change. It is just that currently, these countries have a low GDP. And therefore, they are inclined, because their currency isn't as valuable, right, to also not have as much purchase power, which is another very important economic term. So they cannot invest a lot of money, and therefore, they are participating in the lottery, which makes sense.
Right.
So in like a full story, we go through the economic history of the entire world just to end up at tier 3 countries participate in the lottery. Not to get confused because it says tier 1 here, but that's just the ranking of the tiers. But that's the reason why a lot of these people participate, because let's dial it even more back. In the Netherlands, the average wage is about $2,500 a month, right? If you win a lottery and you're allowed to invest $20, that's what a high school kid earns working one day in the grocery store, right? But if you would go into a tier 3 nation, like, I don't know, even like war-torn, like Afghanistan or something, $20 is probably a month's worth of salary. I'm not really too sure if that's accurate, but just to show the resemblance, that for these people, it makes a lot of sense to participate in the lottery, because the guaranteed allocation is way too expensive. This is $1,300. Right? That's maybe they need to save 1 year for this. And in the Netherlands, a high school student would be able to afford this working at the fucking grocery store, right? In relative terms, don't get me wrong, a bread in Afghanistan is maybe 6 cents and a bread in the Netherlands is $3, right? That's also important to note, that it's like, but in this example, it is very interesting because on the tier 3 countries, the participants, there is a lot of reach, and the goal is marketing reach, right, of the lottery. So it's perfectly designed to do what it was supposed to do. And that's why these tiers are a lot more interesting than it might just appear when you read the tiers, because we would assume, or at least I would assume, and I think most people in general, that on these tiers, you just look at what's relevant for you, not per se for the business or how does it work. Because one of the more important metrics is, let's say you own a project, right? And you're going to launch it. He's like, yeah, I can see that.
I can see that happening. I can see that. Yeah. Continue.
Let's say you're going to deploy a token, right? From a business point of view, would you rather have 10 people hold that token or 100 people hold that token?
100 people.
Why?
More reach, more people.
Oh, that's one thing. So let's say your token valuation is $1,000, right? So the 1,000 divided by 10 or divided by 100, what would be the metric? What would be your choice?
All right. So when you have 10 people, you have bigger holders. If you have 100, you have a lot of small ones. But if you have only 10 people, it means that if one was to, let's say, sell all of its coins, then it would have a bigger price impact. So 100 would be preferred.
Awesome. Perfect. So it's about relative price impact, right? What happens if you have a dozen tier 9 people buying 60% of the supply? Then your relative holder count is really low. So again, with these lotteries, they introduce a lot of holders, which get like $4, $6 worth of allocation, and they spread. So it's not per se that the whales cannot dump, they can still dump, but the perceived value in the holder count is now higher, right? It's not actually fully covered, but they at least try to do something about it, right? Which is also an interesting concept of the lottery pool. That is one of the reasons that it's there to assist with the user spread. But yeah, definitely to be, I would say, to be considered. What prevents one, if you look at this? So what is the highest amount that you would be able to buy? Because you don't want to have one guy buying 50% of the pool, right?
Right, for sure. So what I've seen, and I actually don't have the answer, right? So I'm just gonna actually ask a double question here, because what I've seen in other launchpads, you've seen people actually staking much more than the highest tier, which makes no sense.
Doesn't it? Why not?
Well, because you already reached the highest tier. It's not that the platform says you're going to get even more rewards for staking this many extra. It's like, yeah, I mean, you get the highest tier. Even if you go above that, you will still get only the benefits of the highest tier, right?
Yes. And what are the benefits of the highest tier?
Biggest pool weight
and
guaranteed allocation.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of the tokens of the Launchpad.
A lot of the tokens of the Launchpad. Is that a benefit?
Yeah, you got a lot of tokens. You got a lot of tokens that you purchase.
Is that a good thing for you? Because you bought them.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I would see them as just a ticket into the tiers. Like usually I see the Launchpad coins going down. It's not really necessarily a profitable investment most of the time. So
no.
I would just buy exactly what I would need to get myself the tier that I want.
Yes.
And then
so you take the risk there, right? There is some risk involved. How do they compensate you for this risk? Because you say staking gives you access to guaranteed allocation, but we're missing one big thing, because there would be a reason. Okay, so the APY, right? So on every single tier on Seedify, the APY goes up. Right. Let me show you actually, because that's like an interesting part of the equation here as well to be taken into consideration, because that would be a reason to stake more than what you would have to stake for that specific tier. So 14 days, 7 days, 0%, 14 now. So yeah, you need to connect your wallet, but I'm not, hang on. There we go. 5%, 11, 25, 60. See, 55% already. 90 days. Look, that's me. 5,000 S fund. 75%. And then 180 days, 90%. Right? So yes, it might not be as super relevant to stake more, but you could stake more for the APY gain, right? That's attached to it. And the APY gain could potentially make up for the loss in value of the token if the market is bearish or moving sideways, right? But before then, there was quite an interesting question, right? What prevents a whale from buying 50% of the pool?
Right. So you get a maximum allocation. So when you have all of your coins staked and you get your allocation, that is kind of a maximum. So you get to invest. It's like a second investment, right? So first you invest the tokens to get the allocation, and then you will get a maximum allocation, which you will then be allowed into, put, let's say, a maximum of $500 for the biggest tier, let's say. So that's your maximum. So you can't actually go higher than that.
No?
No? Is that not true?
Well, in theory, that's true, right? But you're smart, we're smart. Based on what is the prohibition set that we are prohibited from buying more?
Yeah, I
the
mean,
tier, right?
The tier. You can get multiple.
Yes, but how can we get multiple?
Different wallets.
Different wallets. So ultimately you can just basically rig the game by doing multiple wallets. But that's again spreading the holder count. So they always win something. So you have to look at this from a business point of view. When they increase the risk by allowing users to buy more, they always need to have a benefit. It will never be 100% fully closed off, right? Because that's the blockchain. It's still in progress, in development, little hiccups. But at least, even though somebody uses a different wallet, they increase the holder count. So that's also beneficial, right? There's small things to highlight there, but definitely it would be possible to buy double tier. And ultimately for a launchpad, the goal is to sell out, and these huge whales, they help a lot, right? To sell out projects. So you kind of hate them and you love them. You love them because they support your project, they believe in it, they stake for a long time usually, and they participate in every single project. And you only hate them when the project hates them, right? Because either the spread is not good. So from a launchpad business point of view, you love them. And from a marketing point of view, you only are annoyed by them when the client is annoyed by them. And otherwise you don't give a fuck, basically.
Exactly.
Because they are the biggest cheerleaders, right? Ultimately. So why, what would be a reason, for example, that there are launchpads that are lottery only? It's kind of strange.
Yeah, that is kind of strange, but I have seen those, and usually they have like the biggest tier is like 99% win rate because you get like thousands of lottery tickets.
Yes, but still lottery. And there's a specific reason why they make it lottery. It has to do with the projects that they incubate. Also an interesting one.
It's news to me.
So what would be, so if you would only do lottery, right? It means that relatively you get a lot of participants, right? And why would a project need a lot of participants?
Kind of what we discussed, marketing, reach, spread, all of those reasons.
But that would count for every project.
Yes.
Right? Every project needs go-to-market exposure ultimately.
Yeah.
But there's one specific type of utility that requires investors to become users.
Right. Could it be something to do with games, game projects, IGOs, that they actually want them to participate in gaming? Yeah. What else? I mean, you're not going to, you could participate in IDO as well, actually. So it's just a guess.
Yeah, but really. I mean, like a launchpad of a launchpad, we don't see that often, but there's launchpad that solely focus on GameFi. And coincidentally, if you would layer all the launchpads next to one another, and you would only select the ones at GameFi, their lottery odds are 300% higher, their relative pools compared to the guaranteed allocation, because they want to do a lot of lottery, because they want to do a lot of marketing exposure. That's one. But the other side of the equation is that they want to convert investors to users. If you look at crypto adoption, play to earn, 95, 96% of play to earn is investors playing games, which is extremely unlikely. Because if you would look at real investors, right? I don't want to call myself a real investor, but let's say tier one investors, they don't have time to play fucking games for $2 a day. But because it's lottery, because it's a lot of tier three involvement, and for these people, $10, $20 a day is quite significant, you know, to earn. So there they layer it through to basically get both sides of the benefit. One, they have investors, they have a large spread, they have a lot of marketing, and they yield users at the same time. That's why gaming guilds are usually have a VC behind it, because they invest, and in the games that they invest, they use all their scholars, which is the gaming guilds users, to play the fucking games, which the scholars win. The company takes revenue share of what the scholars earn, and they also get return on their investment for the game because the game is being played. So they win on three ends, basically creating a full support ecosystem. Quite interesting how that works, because ultimately they crave users and investors, and then it's win-win-win for everybody, unless it doesn't work, and then everybody's fucked. But that's the risk of investing, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Let's see a different tier pool, because CDFI is probably one of the best examples with how they structured it. Quite neat quite a good overview, but there's also Red Kite. I don't know if it's on this list, but I know they have quite an interesting pool. Or let's see, Avalanche. Now, Avalanche is, I think, lottery only. They don't have guaranteed allocation. Yeah. What's it called? It's called Red Kite something. Red Kite Dragon or something. Red Kite Launchpad tiers. Okay, here we go. Polka Foundry, that's what it's called. All right, let's see. What do we have? Because they have like, oh, here we go. So a minimum amount of Red Kite points required. So that's basically the staking, what they need. So you got Dove, Hawk, Eagle, Phoenix. That's what there's. So 4 tiers, 1, 2, 3, 4. Minimum staking time required. I think this is already not up to date, but we can take it as an example anyway. So you can see they have guaranteed allocation, 3 pools. They have lottery on the first pool, right? Which usually makes sense. But they also have exclusive pools. What would be, if you look at a Launchpad, what could be exclusive pools?
Good question. I suppose the name is a pretty big indicator. It is a pool that that only the people from Eagle and Phoenix will be able to access.
Yes, but what type of pool would those be? I know what exclusive means.
Yeah.
So you said on a Launchpad, there are 2 types of pools that can be hosted.
Yeah.
Which ones?
Private, public.
Yes.
You think that's for the private ones?
Yes. So they just,
gotcha.
Again, it's about perceived value, right? They could say private sale pools, but they make it sound exclusive. So they say exclusive pools. And those private sales, because they're cheaper, bigger investment, usually, they only offer those to Eagle and Phoenix because they're bigger investors, right?
Right.
So occasional airdrop of NFT and tokens is obviously some bullshit marketing gimmick, right?
It's funny, they actually put in small letters subject to availability. So in Eagle, it's not guaranteed.
No, usually what happens is they offer it at Phoenix. If they fill it up, then those guys don't get it, right? And if they don't fill it up, then they can also participate.
Right.
And a private prosperity group, that's also marketing gimmicks, right? So if we go to Unix Gaming, then we can look at their tiers, because they have also quite extensive tiers. Launchpad tiers. I think the tiers are here somewhere anyway. Yes. So we have 6 tiers. Public, maximum $100 allocation into each project, no Unix token requirement, and capped allocation. So basically it's leftover allocation. That's what you can read from this. Then you have common, 2000 Unix tokens staked, minimum allocation 1.5 times public round. So 1.5 times what they get. Additional benefits, allocation is lottery, and early access to gearing and merge, also marketing gimmicks, right? Allocation lottery still on the uncommon tier, 5,000 Unix tokens staked, 3 times higher than public. So this is maximum 100. So this is maximum 300, right? Early access, NFT drops, early access, also marketing stuff. 20,000 tokens. Okay, here you get guaranteed allocation. And again, more marketing gimmicks. 5 times public round, 10 times public for 50,000 tokens. Here you have NFT treasury access, and that would be interesting for an investor, right? So one of the first things that I would say, well, that's interesting. 100,000 tokens is the one I have, obviously. Minimum 50 times allocation and private chat with founding team. I think for a big time investor, bigger investors, right? The biggest ones on the Unix Launchpad, that is also interesting, right? To have a chat with the founding team. Not that I don't have all of them on WhatsApp, but I think for somebody who's not into the crypto business, it would be very nice to at least get their insights and the direction where the company is going, right? But very interesting to see that they have basically 3 lottery pools, right? It's basically a leftover dumpster pool, right? But they have like 2 lotteries and then 3 guaranteed, where it basically was 5 guaranteed before. So they also made some relevant changes here. Allocation into new projects are dependent on a per project basis. This information will be given through announcement information on the project. That's for people that ask You know, how much is the allocation? It's quite difficult because they don't use pool weights, right? They still use pool weights, but this is basically a 1-to-1, 1.5 times to 1, 3-to-1, 5-to-1, 10-to-1, 15-to-1. So you can still, this the pool weight is 15, 10, 5. They just noted it a little bit different, right? But you can basically see that the relative pool weight is not as significant in terms of difference than on Seedify.
Right.
But we're talking here $10,000 or $8,000 at the moment relative to maybe, what is it, like 160 bucks. So 10,000, like 8,000 to 160, quite a big difference still. But on Seedify at $1.33, you're talking basically guaranteed allocation, $1,300 to $133,000. Right, the gap is way bigger. I do think that the pool weight is here designed a little bit better. I think the gaps are a little bit too small and they will have to make it a little bit bigger. But what would be the reason? That's a good question, actually. What would be the reason to not distribute the pool weights too big?
Like not have too many tiers.
Yes, or these pool weights are quite close, you know, like we go from 1 to 15-to-1. And here we go from 1.2 to 325. It's a huge difference, right?
Right.
And the other one is only 1 to 15, not that much.
Yeah.
Two reasons.
I wouldn't know. Quick guess, actually. I think it might actually have to do with the spread, that they don't want too big of a difference between the largest investors and the smaller investors, and they would prefer everyone to kind of settle down in equal distributed amount of tiers, if that makes any form of sense.
That makes a lot of sense, but the question is, why would they want that? Because that is very much correct. That is what they're doing. But the interesting answer, of course, is why are they doing it?
I don't know. It feels weird. It feels like you shouldn't be doing that.
But they are making the right decision. I'm thinking of it right now, but they are doing that for a very specific reason. So think about Seedify launched and they had 3 tiers. Then 8 months later, they updated their tiers to 9 tiers, right? Why would they update their tiers 9 months after launch?
More people than they expected.
More people. All right, so Unix hasn't done any launch. They said Launchpad coming soon, right?
Right.
So why do they want to keep the spread so close?
They haven't started yet.
And what does that mean?
It means that they're not sure yet how many people are actually going to participate.
Yes, but if the question would be how many people are actually going to participate relative to Seedify?
Right, less.
Less. So because you have
so.
a smaller audience pool, you want the spread also not to be super significant because you already don't have that many people. So if you don't have a lot of people, then either you stimulate the whale action even more, and therefore the performance of your projects, which are very sensitive because you're just getting started. And at the same time, the user spread will be very small. So you'll have big problems to fill the pools if the legendary tier holders don't participate or don't want to participate. So they keep that spread closer together to de-risk the situation. And once they actually see that they can fill the pools, etc., they will either make more tiers or they will up the pool weights based on the data they have gathered. But it's obviously, this is one of my favorite things in business in general, but also as an investor, to actually not only think about what's in it for me, but to analyze what is happening. I want to understand it, right? That's why I used to do all these research reports, because I want to understand tokenomics. I want to understand these Launchpad tiers. What is actually happening with these tiers, and also why are they doing it? Because we can all see, you know, 15-to-1 is a huge difference from 325-to-1. You know, I think that's quite big. I have another tier system I want to show you. And obviously there is no perfect way on these tiers, right? There's like different options, different ways of doing things. But this is, I spoke with one of their management guys about their tier system, because I've been publicly not a fan of how they have designed it. If I phrased it correctly, somebody is mentally retarded. That's what I said, who designed this system. Because look at it, right? I don't even think this is up to date. They did an update on it, but so there's a surprise lottery. So what does that mean? We will randomly pick 10 lucky winners of the light tier and airdrop them an IMO launch prize. Okay, light tier, flame power requirement 500. So there's like some power, which means like you need to stake in order to get balance. So this launchpad basically like you have different type of tiers. So you tier, and then you use basic, but you also have like hydrazine. We'll go into that in a second. Like you get power points that you can spend and shit. It's quite difficult. Right. And what this launchpad did, took 5 of these difficult systems and combined them into one. And that's why this is so fucking messy. But so you have your tier, right here, and you have flame power. Base allocation multiplier per tier, not applicable. Base allocation 2 times, 4 times, 8 times. So these are your pool weights. Yes. Mm-hmm. But you also get lottery tickets, chances to win. So 10 lucky winners will get the prize. Then you have 1 to 9 tickets, 10 to 19 tickets, 20 to 49 tickets, and 50 tickets. So that means that 90% of the tiers are lottery, right? But here you have so many tickets that you're likely to win an allocation, right? As you mentioned before, because there are not that many flame tiers, and look at the spark tier, right? You need so many more flame power, and you have so many more tokens on lottery tickets that it's very likely that you will be selected, right? Cooldown period, 7 days after successful IMO participation, you cannot participate again, which is also to be considered. But there is, so that doesn't count for the top 10 on the Flame leaderboard. So that's also important to note. For the top 10, there's no cooldown. Okay, make it more confusing. But there is also guaranteed allocation. Top 100 on the Flame leaderboard and hero NFT holders, amount of max allocation depends on the tier. So you can get guaranteed, but then again depends on your tier, which then again depends on all these powers and lottery tickets and pool weight, and don't forget your reset based on how many projects you can participate in. 5 different variables if it's not difficult enough. Guaranteed allocation, top 25 on Flame leaderboard and hero holders are qualified for guaranteed allocation, but here it says top 100, also confusing. Yeah. Right? Okay, so let's look at that leaderboard. Oh, it's not clickable. That's a shame. Somebody's writing.
Makes no sense. It's underlined. It should be clickable.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, okay, leaderboards right here. Because I like the idea. It all sounds really cool, but I think in practice it's not that convenient. So there's somebody with almost 400,000 flame power through whale, right? Because the second is only 280, 260. So they have the flame tier, and then guaranteed allocation multiplier 8 times. And then you need top 100 to get guaranteed allocation, but it only shows top 25 because it's obviously older UI design, right? So top 200, last updated 44 minutes ago. So you would need for guaranteed allocation and then the highest tier, right? So you have to be top, you need to have 125 power. Then I assume it's like a 1-to-1 ratio, depending on how long you stake it. I'm not too sure, but let's look at what that flame token costs at the moment. Not that much, I think. It used to be quite good, but it has gone down a lot. Yes. Boom.
Wow.
And if you want to know why launchpads are losing value, check out my other video. So 3 cents. Marketing. Yeah, obviously. So it's going to cost you like $3,000, right? Over 4.5, which like in the current market conditions is not too bad. But this is obviously one example of like extremely complex tiering where they get an insane amount of questions because there's NFT holders involved. Does it count double the guaranteed allocation? I think even the team itself is confused by what the answers would be, right? It's more like, oh, let the system do its work, and then we'll see how much allocation you get. I think it's not the best thing because you would always want to know beforehand what counts toward allocation and what doesn't, because ultimately it's competition, right? So you have, let's say, the high percent launch pad. on Cadena, you have Star Launch, which is like a shit launchpad, but it's good to show. So High% uses whatever they use. I don't even know what it's called, but it's like some Stardust or whatever. So basically, the whole idea about these metrics is to make the distribution and spread more competitive. So you stake your tokens, you get some kind of in-game currency, right? And with that currency, you submit to your pool weight, just like the digits coins would function, right? The only thing is that these usually look at this. This is some like gamification of how it works. Welcome, blah, blah, blah. There's some music. I don't like this at all. It's not a game. It's a fucking launchpad.
Yeah,
right. And I mean, it's
well.
cool, but maybe focus on doing good launches instead of making this look like you're the next Call of Duty, you know?
And they had a good website as well before. They changed this recently.
Yeah, and it's really annoying music as well. So yeah.
Oh, you can mute it actually on the left, on the bottom left.
Oh yeah, perfect. So you need to connect your wallet to get info, but they have a pitch deck, so we can probably see what the currency is called in the pitch deck. So the economics, we don't care. Team, they suck. So that's it. Okay, there's not much to it.
I believe it was hydrogen actually.
Here
they had star and hydrogen.
Oh yeah, N2H4. That's what it's called. Yeah, hydrogen perhaps. No tiers, but so they're saying no tiers, but obviously you need to understand that there are tiers, and it's based on the consumption of this stuff. So a good example for DigitsClub, for example, is it wouldn't be fair to say there's no tiers. There is tiers, but there are no fixed tiers. Biggest NFT holders have the biggest tiers because they yield the most digits coins, and they can choose how to spend them, right? But it doesn't mean that there is no tier system. We still classify the users, even on our backend, how we monitor the pools. There's classifications to see, like, these people will probably take this percentage of the pool, and we need to make sure that it's distributed properly, right? So there always will be, because you need to divide the allocation, and you want to divide it as fair as possible, right? But what does that mean?
It means that yeah, what it says really, I suppose, just you don't want one person holding everything, right?
Why not? If that person is me, then it's all good.
Fair enough, maybe, yeah. I don't think I have a very clear answer to that, no.
What was the question again?
Why you want it to be equal? I don't think I
I got you. No, I mean, like the relative, the relative spread, why it should be fair, right? Why should there be tiers in place? I think looking at the overall scheme, how it works, people invest into a token or whatever currency NFT tool to get access. They buy into some kind of key to get access to what they want, right? And you need to give them at least some type of fulfillment based on that requirement. And I think that is the basic, why even there's like lottery stuff, you know, you might not always be able to offer them something, but at least you offer them the opportunity to get something, right, which is better than offering them nothing, right? Yeah. And that's usually what we see with these pools and the structure behind it. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of variation. So you have the basic straight pools like CDFI has, right? Like Unix has. I think that's probably the best choice. Clean, transparent, easy to calculate for everybody. Then you have the more complex systems like the Star Lounge, like the Hydrocene you mentioned, High% that use more complex structures, which is a gamification in itself. So I understand why they would do it. I'm just not a huge fan of it myself because I like to see things clearly, like transparently, and they can really manipulate things by adding in more variables, right? Because the more variables you add into the soup, the less clear the soup becomes because you have to keep track of everything. And then you have the fire starter, which I don't even think they are happy with their own tiers, right? Where it's like a little bit too messy, where it's like, hey, maybe you should reevaluate that. Unlike a user point of view, what determines ultimately which tier you would end up in?
Right. I think a couple of reasons go into that. Like we said before, first of all, it's about how much money do you actually have to spend. If you don't have the money, some tiers will just not be available to you. Another variable will be, of course, how much do you believe in the Launchpad and the project? If you are kind of on the fence, you just kind of want to see what happens. You're not going to go for the biggest tier. That will be stupid. So I think those two are the biggest reasons. I think all the reasons, really. How much money you got to spend and how much of a believer are you in the project and the Launchpad?
When you say believer, what does that mean? Because those are like empty terms, right? We like to talk in business terms, or at least investing terms.
Fair enough. If you see potential.
Yes. And what is the counter side of potential?
Not potential.
Yeah. So you make an investment, and every investment carries
risk.
So the opposite side of potential is the risk that they carry, right? So ultimately, it's not that you're not sure about the potential, you understand the risk, right?
Fair enough.
So the potential is always the good side, and we always like to tend to look at the bad side, right? Because if everything goes good, great. But if it doesn't, we need to be able to de-risk. So the only reason that you wouldn't take the highest tier is you want to see proof of concept and consistency and then go up, right? So if we would de-risk, right? But I still want the highest allocation possible. And that cannot happen on one launchpad. What would then happen?
You'll go to another one.
Yes, but how can I make that choice? Because I want to invest the least and get the most in terms of allocation.
Right. Go to smaller Launchpad.
Why?
They have less people, so they have cheaper tiers. So it's cheaper to get the biggest tier.
Is that true, or is that an assumption?
It's an assumption, but
I believe could be true.
It's a pretty accurate.
It would make sense, but there's one problem.
What's the
problem? So I think it's also accurate, and I think usually smaller launchpads have relatively cheaper tokens and relatively lower barriers for entry because that's why they're small.
Right.
But the problem is their pools are also a lot smaller. So where DAOmaker raises $1 million, AnyPad only raises $40,000. So if you go to that launchpad, you might get potentially cheaper tokens, higher tier, but still less allocation than you would in DAOmaker because the pool is so much smaller.
Right. So
that's something to consider. So what would like the things be that we have to take into consideration when I would like to say I want to spread across multiple launchpads to get the highest yield for the lowest risk?
You can take lower tiers in multiple launchpads.
Yes. But what do I have to consider? So that there are some things that I have to research in order to get to the right outcome. What are things that we need to consider?
To consider what tier you would like to get, you mean?
Yes, or which launchpads in general?
Yeah,
it would be like a little checklist of things that I would have to consider before making a choice. I have to take all these things into consideration.
Right. So when looking at a launchpad, I suppose the first thing you do, of course, is look at the price of the launchpad. It will determine the price and the price of the token and the tiers, so that you can determine the price.
What kind of tier would I like?
That depends. Again, if you want the big one, then you go for the big one.
But let's say there's one fundamental thing that I want in terms of a launchpad, right? We want allocation. So which pool do I definitely not get?
The lottery ones.
The lottery
ones.
So basically, I need to know what you said in summarizing your words, the price of the token relative to the tiers, relative to the first option of guaranteed allocation. That is one thing that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are other things?
Team, who's behind the project, give you a bit of an indicator. Seen projects where it's basically a one-man show. Look at KingPad, it's and then you have other launchpads that have actual veterans with sometimes decades of experience. And
DigitsPad.
DigitsPad, Big, amazing choice, guys. Amazing choice.
Yeah,
So I
I mean,
think
like
that
the
would be
team, I
the,
think is like important.
yeah.
Like in a bear, a lot more important than in a bull. I think in a bull market is like not important at all, as long as they can communicate properly. But what would be like? So we have like, if you look at team, right? When you say operations and stuff, what else falls under operations? What I think is extremely important. So
Right.
you want to basically know if the team has been doing a good job, or is doing a good job, or can do a good job. How can we see that?
Well, I like to look at a couple of things. I think roadmap is good to see the progress that they've made. If there is a roadmap in general, if there isn't, probably indicates that they haven't been doing that much. And of course, the community. I've seen so many times, scrolling through Twitter or Telegram and just seeing people asking, this update is like a year overdue. Nothing is happening. We're asking questions. No one answers. So
Yes.
I think it's very easy to find if they're actually doing something, if they're working on things, updates on their website, a Medium,
Yes.
stuff like that.
Okay, so let me break you down. When you go into the communities, there's sentiment, right? Just somebody's opinion on what's going on. It's not what actually is going on. When you read a roadmap, it's your interpretation of the roadmap, right? It's your opinion. When you, what was the other one? Updates, right? So updates is of course consistency, right? That is important, but is it a key business factor that influences your investment? No. So now we have some loose terms, right? Basically opinion based, and we're looking at the opposite of opinion. What is the opposite of opinion?
Fact.
Facts. So what would be the number one thing that we look at to see if a Launchpad team has been doing a good job for the last 6 months?
Yeah, results, project results.
Yes, past project performance, right? That doesn't mean everything, right? But at least if they can select good projects, that's one of the number one things. Okay, so we go back.
Right.
We want guaranteed allocation for a certain token price that fits our wallet, and we look at past performance of the Launchpad, right? That's how we rank them. So now we are de-risking and at the same time looking for highest yield, right? Past performance rewards, gains relative to lowest barrier of entry, which basically creates equilibrium, right? Lowest risk, highest reward. And that's where we would want to be. However, of course, we have to be always cynical, right? What is one of the classic investment theories, basis, principles that would apply here? It's like a general investment saying. If you Google classic investment one-liners, you will get this quote.
I'm not going to have the right quote.
Past performance is no indicator for future results.
Right.
Because we would always look at past performance because that is what has happened. So that's the most accurate representation of what we can learn about, but it doesn't guarantee what the future can happen. Things that would be described by Americans as act of God, like tornado, hurricane, like these type of things, right? It's kind of funny because we don't speak like that, right? But they call it act of God, earthquake, these type of things. No matter how accurate your technical analysis is, it doesn't take into consideration these events, right? And ultimately, when we go a little bit deeper, non-business related, there is in life all types of moments that are these moments that make your life the way it is, right? You cycle or you drive a car every single day, the same road, but one day you get hit by a truck, right? And that is that moment that alters your life in terms of how things are going to progress onwards. So usually the makes or breaks in the market are not your standardized events. 3 Arrows Capital, Luna, right? Because of Luna, and 3 Arrows, while the market was already bearish, it was really pushed down a lot. It basically now restructures what DeFi is supposed to be, right? Innovation, but it also shows the weaknesses of launchpads, right? Which is like collateral damage, but very important. And I think that we overemphasize. So it's not important to look at past results. We utilize the tools that are important to us in the current moment to the best of our capabilities, yet doesn't mean everything.
Right.
right? We shouldn't go blindly into these manners like, oh, but it can't go wrong because of this. Investment carries risk, no matter how solid the investment, right? Because there's people involved, and where people work, mistakes are being made. It's like a natural occurrence. And I mean, I make little mistakes, you make many, but I'm kidding. I'm playing. I probably lately I've probably been the one making the most mistakes, but it's a good thing, because that's how we progress, right? And if we like, I think especially when we look at these launch pads, most of them don't consider the mistakes that have been made or are about to occur, right? Because they're so focused on other things that if you don't zoom out, you know, like for example, I think it's extremely important for a launchpad to once a month at least evaluate their tiers, right? But I reckon, I don't know, this is just assumptions as well, opinion perhaps, when I would ask all these launchpad owners, what is the average amount of participants, they know because it's registered on the pool, right? But what is the distribution among these, they don't know. Well, I think it's a key performance indicator to see who the whales are, and perhaps you want to build a relationship with them, right? But that's because the crypto market is very short-term focused, right? They're very much like, how many projects can we do? How much money can we raise? And they can't really zoom out. And I think that's why we're doing this Launchpad school, to see, it's not because influencer XYZ is saying that this is a good project. There's so many assets that we could review before a single project is listed, that we know this is maybe 50% and 50% is the project. And then later, at a later stage, we'll cover the projects in detail, like tokenomics, what we looked at, these metrics. And then ultimately, you kind of know beforehand what the results are going to be. But then again,
never for sure.
Yes, that's the biggest lesson of today. Rick, any final questions for you, sir?
Nah, another very productive Launchpad school.
Glad to hear it. Quite intense. Tiers is definitely not my favorite topic, so I'm glad we got it over with. I'm definitely looking forward over the next few weeks to really dive into the active pools and go through these projects, basically determining what makes a good and or a bad project, based on the assets the project provides, and not certainly like the opinion, just the facts. Relative, it's all about comparison ultimately, but we need to understand the foundation. So we've done Launchpad tokenomics, Launchpad's market valuation, and now the tiers and what goes around with that. Next week, we will finalize the Launchpad conclusion before diving into the projects. Rick, thank you so much for joining me once more. Everybody else, thank you so much for watching, and we will be back next week with another Launchpad school. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.